Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 16. Sutta said, Thereafter, O Vipras, that mighty one accepted from the twice-borns instruction. He was a great devotee of high worth, and guided by the wise governed the earth. He was endued with those virtues extolled at his birth that the seers had foretold. To Uttara's monarch he was allied, and took Princess Iravati for bride, and got 4 sons on her of worthy fame, headed by Janamejaya by name. Upon the Ganga's bank he performed thrice with bounteous gifts the horse sacrifice, with Saradwat to guide the sanctities, where could be viewed the present deities. In the progress of his march of conquest, he saw Kali in royal raiment dressed. Our hero did chastise him and restrain, who, footing a cow and bull, caused them pain. Shonaka said, while on his tour of conquest, why did he merely restrain and but chastise Kali, who, although base, wore the signs of a king, causing a cow and bull much suffering, by striking with his foot, inflicting pain? O fortunate one, the reason explain. Expound the theme, if it has reference to Krishna's deeds of passing excellence. For those who lick, as 'twere, the honey sweet, distilled from the Lord's lotus flower feet, what use is there in other topics vain, which doth away one's longevity drain? O dear one, the lifetime of any man is short, and also of uncertain span. Desirous from death to gain respite, we have invited him to share the right. So long as Antaka himself appears, invited and invoked by the great seers, and since that god of death hath here arrived, none present here shall be of life deprived. Therefore wondrous deeds of Hari describe, that people may ambrosia imbibe. The dull-witted and those of meagre brain, those who but pass their paltry lives in vain, during the night asleep the time they spend, the day in acts that serve no useful end. Sutta said, while Parikshit empire did sustain over Kuru Jangala's vast domain, the news was brought to his attentive ear, which was most unpleasant for him to hear, that Kali, with his pollution and stain, had entered regions of his royal reign, which, when these unpleasant tidings he heard, took up his bow to martial ardour stirred. The king on his world conquest thus proceeds, on his chariot drawn by sable steeds, adorned with various decoration, and banner emblazoned with a lion, and left the capital with puissant force of foot and car and elephant and horse. The regions of Bharata he suppressed, his way to the northern Kurus he pressed, conquest of King Purushas he pursued, exacted tribute, conquered and subdued. Everywhere in the country, in each town, he heard of his great ancestors' renown. He hears in song wherever he proceeds the fame of Krishna and his mighty deeds. He heard how the Lord did his death prevent, what time Ashwatthama his missile sent, his affection for Parthas and Vrishnis, and how they were Keshava's devotees. Hearing all this, The king was satisfied, and in wonder his eyes dilated wide. Great wealth, garments, necklaces he consigned in charity, being of noble mind. He heard how Vishnu, whom the world obeys, the sons of Pandu served in diverse ways, as driver, as president of the right, their envoy, who followed them with delight, how he saluted them and loved them well, and stood guard over them as sentinel. When he of the Lord and his servants heard, with love for those lotus feet he was stirred. He thus observed his great ancestors' ways, and in good offices he spent his days. But hear the wonder that to him befell, not long after, as I shall to you tell. Lo, he beheld Dharma with one leg there, approaching a cow fraught with anxious care, with tears deprived of her offspring distressed. Then Dharma to her these questions addressed. Dharma said, O blessed dame, is all with thee not well? What ails thee, dear mother? I pray thee tell. A dark shadow of grief your face disdains. Do you suffer from distemper and pains? Or do you for a dear friend, long absent in anguishing and sore distress, lament? Or are you haply lamenting for me, with but one leg, as you can plainly see? Or are you distressed and discomfited, that you by wretches will be exploited? Or is it again for the gods you grieve, who no longer due offerings receive? Or are you fraught with anxious care and doubt, that subjects will suffer from dearth and drought? Or does the very thought cause you distress for women and children who are helpless, whose guardians persist in cruel deeds, like one who on his fellow creatures feeds? Do you sorrow for the goddess of speech, when schools of Brahmins unrighteousness teach? Perhaps you sorrow for the Brahmins wise in subjection to royal families. Or do you see in rulers the decline in the course of inexorable time, where burdened with irremediable cares, the order they corrupt of state affairs? Or do you lament for the sorry state of man in general degenerate, who follow not observance nor decree, but eat and drink as bids necessity? Who bathe and indulge their base appetites, enamoured of trivial and vain delights? Or haply, dear mother, you are aggrieved, since whilom your burden had been relieved, when divine Hari incarnate took his birth. Is it not so, O blessed Mother Earth? His sublime exploits salvation afford. Do you repine in absence of that Lord? O blessed Mother Earth, pray tell to me the root cause of your dire perplexity, whereby you have of vigour been deprived. Is it indeed by mighty time contrived? It seems you have your blessed fortune lost, admired by the celestial host. Dharani, earth, said, O Dharma, all thou hast inquired of me is already comprehended by thee, since erstwhile thou wert by 4 legs sustained, and happiness in all the world maintained. Truth, purity, tolerance, and kindness, renunciation, pleased, straightforwardness, satisfied, fixed, pure equanimity, self-control, mind control, austerity, wisdom, dispassion, duty, lordliness, heroic wise, with power and prowess, independent, indifferent, dexterous, sober, gentle, potent, illustrious, diligent, determined, and mannerly, of perfect knowledge and sublime beauty, fortunate, profound, and of firm intent, faithful and famous and preeminent, devoid of pride, such qualities divine, in the Almighty One eternal shine, that the wise and the great strive to attain, which undiminished e'er with him remain, who is the source of every quality and resting place of the great goddess Shri. I lament loss of fortune mine of late, and of the people's pitiable state. Now Kali's sinful influence has spread, I am grieving and much dispirited. I also sorrow for myself, distressed, O thou of the immortal ones the best. I pity gods, manes, and sages great, the holy ones, and noble caste and state, whom Brahma and such other gods adore, prompted by desire, her grace implore, and long penances and worship maintain, the bounty of her gracious glance to gain. But that same Shri forsook her lotus grove, enamoured of his lotus feet and love. And I was also with such fortune blessed, with his divine footprints on me impressed, the lotus, thunderbolt, the flag, and goad, imprinted on my bosom as he strode. And thus decorated I did appear, surpassing splendour of the triple sphere. Such blessing of which I might proudly boast, to me, in the end, has been sadly lost. I was oppressed by the cumbersome load of demon clans, who on me made abode, with hundreds of Akshauhinis arrayed. He slew them all. You were also dismayed, due to your want of legs, but he restored your vigour, that supreme almighty lord, assumed a handsome form in Yadu's race, to exercise his manliness and grace. Who can therefore from him severance bear? The supreme Lord Purushottama dear, who with his loving glances and his smiles and sweet talk his proud lady love beguiles, and when his lotus feet o'er me would pass, my hair bristled as sprouting blades of grass. While Prithvi and Dharma were immersed, and on these various subjects conversed, the king, sagacious Parikshit by name, to where Saraswati flows eastward came. Thus ends chapter 16 in book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, the text beloved of swan-like saints, sung by the son of Vyasa. Chapter 17. Sutta said, the king beheld the bovine couple there, her hard beaten as if they had no master, receiving with a rod a sound drubbing from a base villain dressed up like a king. White as lotus fibres, the bull divine, in the convulsions of fear past urine, and though only on one leg he trod, the peasant struck him fiercely with his rod. The cow also, distressed and poor besides, who virtue in the form of milk provides, without her calf disconsolate and weak, with tearful eyes for fresh green grass did seek. The king, upon his car enchased in gold, with thunderous voice addressed the caitiff bold, and raised his mighty bow and arrow dread, and questioning the malefactor said, you, Who are you that beat without remorse, that on the weak inflict violence and force? Upon my wards, in godlike king's disguise, like a vile dancer, condemned by the wise. Durst thou, deeming Krishna has gone from here, and that archer who did the Gandiva rear, that you may cause the innocent to cry? It is expedient that you should die. And you, white as lotus stems beautiful, with but one leg, appearing as a bull, are you some god or demigod divine that causes us in distress to repine? On all this earth, protected by the arms of Pauravas, none suffer dire alarms. Aside from ye, creatures weep not. Somehow I see you sore distressed and weeping now. O scion of Surabhi, do not grieve. From fear of this peasant I shall relieve. O mother mine, weep not, may all be well, while I am here the wicked ones to quell. If the subjects, O chaste one, are distressed, and by the wicked king the state, and by the wicked in the state oppressed, the king, deluded, loses his good name, his life, his goal, his fortune, and his fame. It is the supreme duty of the king that succour to the sufferers he bring. Therefore, this caitiff who delights in ill, I must in righteousness and duty kill. O scion of Surabhi, who is he who of 4 legs has deprived you of 3? Such deeds in the state had not been espied by kings who have Lord Krishna for their guide. O taintless bull, may all be with you be well, that I may ascertain the culprit. Tell, who has disfigured you? Who is to blame, which brings on Prita's descendants ill fame? Who so inflicts on the good violence, and on offenceless creatures commits offence? But fearing me, when they have been subdued, the good are thereby with blessings endued. The rash caitiff, insolent, unrestrained, by whom the innocent are sorely pained, I shall lop his offending arms and hands, of even a god with golden armbands. It is the highest duty of the king, that to the good who to their duties cling, he affords safety, while those who despise Scripture without reason he must chastise. Dharma said, Your speech befits one of the Pandu line, affording fearlessness, worthy, sublime. Enamoured of their virtue, for whose sake Almighty Krishna as their envoy spake. O best of men, O king, we cannot say or ascertain the cause of misery, for opinions diverse the cause ascribe to things diverse and diversely describe. Some thinkers and philosophers maintain that unfulfilled desire causes pain. Some say the self alone is sorrow's cause, and others blame the stars or nature's laws. Yet others, settled in conviction, tell the cause of pain is supernatural. Therefore, O king, you may yourself attest which of these propositions seemeth best. Sutta said, O first and foremost of the twice-born men, the emperor pondered a while, and then perceived the essence of right conduct clear, and spake unto the bull, as thou shalt hear. The king said, O you who make virtue discernible, O righteousness incarnate as a bull, it seems those who would unrighteousness blame must partake somewhat of the guilt and shame. Therefore it is the Lord's Maya withal, whose ways, unknown, are inconceivable, that neither mind nor speech can ascertain, the sure causes of any creature's pain. Penance, purity, compassion, and truth in Krita are legs of virtue forsooth, but vice hath undermined and broken three with pride, attachment, and insanity. O Dharma, yet your leg of truth remains, and barely haltingly that truth sustains. But vice and Kali mutually strive, you of that last leg of truth to deprive. This earth, indeed, was fortunate of late, with the illustrious one incarnate, when she of her great burden was relieved, and blessedness when his footprints received. But now from her the tears of grief are shed. The chaste one now laments, disquieted, thinking how the base Brahmins would destroy in guise of kings, and her bounty enjoy. Thus virtue and earth, as the bovine pair, were consoled by the great car warrior, the king, on the causes of vice to deal stern punishment, took up his sword of steel. Now when he saw the king intent to slay, in fear he threw his royal garb away, and laid at the feet of the king his head, in perturbation of terror and dread. But when he saw him at his feet resigned, our hero, to the distressed always kind, whose great quality high praises evoke, then with a smile compassionately spoke. The king said, "To one who has inherited the fame of him who bore of Gudakesh the name, whoever with joined palms approaches near can be assured of and entertain no fear. But you cannot be suffered to remain in my vasty and extensive domain, since you are the accomplice and the friend of vice. I shall thence to banishment send. With you present in ruling king's disguise, among the subjects avarice doth rise, falsehood and theft and all iniquity, deception, misfortune, vulgarity, quarrel and arrogance and cheating too, all these signs of adharma follow you. O friend of vice, there you should not remain, where the good truth and righteousness maintain. There should in Brahma-varta be no vice, where worshippers perform due sacrifice, where they who are in wisdom consummate the great Lord of Yajna propitiate. In sacrifice, each high divinity are aspects of illustrious Hari, and those who worship thus welfare secure, and the objects of desire procure. He is the soul of all, and doth abide like air within all beings and outside. Sutta said, admonished thus, Kali was fraught with fear, when he Parikshit's stern decree did hear, and trembled at the sword raised o'er his head, like him who wields the rod, and to him said. Kali said, dread sovereign, as thou hast commanded me to elsewhere dwell, even so let it be, but I shall be afraid where'er I go, at sight of thee with thy arrows and bow. Therefore, upholder of virtue divine, thou shouldst for my dwelling place assign some place where I may suitably remain under the government of your domain. Sutta said, the king, thus having been by him besought, decided as occurred to him the thought, where drinking, gaming, wenching, and killing are indulged, he assigned for his dwelling. And yet again he begged another more, a fifth place over and above the four, the which was gold, the cause of falsity, passion, pride, arrogance, and enmity. These 5 places, then, were assigned to him, where Kali could exercise vice and sin, and thus Kali to these 5 places went, whereto the son of Uttara him sent. The virtuous, kings, and nobility, and preceptors who live in sanctity, who in their righteous duty are employed, such places of iniquity avoid. Restored were broken legs of the bull 3, which are penance, cleanliness, and mercy, and earth was restored to her wonted cheer, to flourish in content and without fear. Thus governed he the ancient royal throne, received from his grandfather as his own, and ruled the subjects for the general good, and thereafter retired to the wood. And even now, upon the legacy of great kings of the Kuru dynasty, of Elephantopolis the renown, upholders of the ruling royal crown, because of Abhimanyu's royal son, our prolonged sacrifice may be begun, whose great deeds and inestimable worth could justly govern and protect the earth. Thus ends chapter 17 in Book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavat Purana, the text beloved of swan-like saints, sung by the son of Vyasa. Chapter 18. Sutta said, "The one struck by the dart of Drona's son while he still lay within his mother's womb. By Krishna's wondrous deed, the Lord Most High, though he was burnt to death, he did not die. On likewise, when he of his death had heard, due to a Brahmin's rage from a snake bird, he was neither afraid nor overawed, since he was one surrendered to the Lord. Thence he all his attachments did resign, with knowledge of Lord Ajita divine, which as Vyasa's pupil he did glean, then gave his body to the Ganga stream. Those who in the sweet narratives immerse themselves of the Lord, praised in charming verse, his lotus-like feet remember steadfast, unbeguiled, even when they breathe their last. What though the proud influence of Kali hath entered in with all iniquity, so long as Abhimanyu's son prevails, of its potent influence Kali fails. Certainly, even from that very day when the Lord had departed on his way, from then contentious Kali entered in with all unrighteousness and vice and sin. The wise emperor the essence could see, who imbibed deep essences as a bee, and did not hate Kali, for well he knew that good deeds in the age quickly accrue, but only evil deeds and not the thought in Kali's age with consequences fraught. When a tiger assails a flock of deer, they flee from dread in terror and in fear. 'Tis fools that Kali's influence beguiles, the self-controlled are conscious of his wiles. According to your just inquiry on Parikshit, I have framed my reply, related to the topics and the deeds of Vasudeva, whence virtue proceeds. Whatever wondrous acts, mighty and bold, the Lord hath done, are worthy to be told, and those who seek their welfare should resort to his service and praise his divine sport." The sages said, "O Sutta, we wish you long life and fame. O gentle one, you worthily proclaim, for discourses on Krishna such as this, to us mortals, is like immortal bliss. This rite we undertake grace to invoke, uncertain is, but involves us in smoke. Your speech affords pleasure like lotus wine, distilled from Govinda's soft feet divine. Of devotees, association rare, even for a moment cannot compare with heaven's joy, no, nor salvation's bliss. For mortals, what could be better than this? Who is that worthy connoisseur aesthete, that satiated is with humours sweet? His exclusive and mighty power great, the lords of yoga could not estimate, nor Bhava, nor the great God who doth sit upon the lotus can reach the limit. Thou art a great and learned devotee, singularly resigned to Lord Hari. Recite to us, who with eagerness long to hear his wondrous deeds in hallowed song. And certes, Parikshit in high degree is counted as a foremost devotee, who with his intellect unsullied fixed, his mind on supreme salvation unmixed, from the son of Vyasa wisdom attained, and worshipful meditation maintained, and focused his mind and understanding at his feet, whose flag blazons the bird king. To us, therefore, that hallowed theme recite, of steadfast yoga, wonder and delight, whence accounts of Ananta are conferred, that were by worthy King Parikshit heard, which fondly please devotees of the Lord, the infinite being and the one adored. Sutta said, though born in mean extraction, I attest, I am today, me, most highly blessed, for service to the elders and the wise, discoursing with the great soon purifies. What then of those who always chant his name? What then of those who always chant the name of the Lord, whom great ones fondly acclaim, who is with infinite potency dight, whose divine qualities are infinite, and who is therefore as Ananta height? Well, as for that, but so much can be said of his inestimable Godhead, who is unexcelled and ineffable, without a peer, and inexpressible, that she, the great goddess whom gods adore, and for her favours earnestly implore, attends his lotus feet with loving care, though he did not desire this of her. So thus is known the glory of the Lord, whose foot-wash by Virinchi is adored, which Isha bears upon his mighty crest, and deems himself as sanctified and blessed. Who but Mukunda in the world could claim of illustrious Bhagavan the name? Whoever thus to love of him betakes, his love for body and its needs forsakes, with self-control and practice of restraint. He follows the way of the swan-like saint, characterized by sober quiescence, duty, dispassion, and non-violence. As far as I have learnt, I shall requite your worthy questions, sun-like sages bright. Thus Vishnu's praises are sung by the wise, according as they know or realize, as even birds that wing the azure sky only as high as strength allows can fly. Upon a day the king with his bow went into the woods upon the chase intent. Wearied from hunting beasts that had dispersed, he was exhausted with hunger and thirst. In search of water, to a hermitage he came and saw a meditating sage. He viewed him seated in silence, reposed, in contemplation deep, with his eyes closed. His life air and his senses were restrained. His mind and intellect steady remained, inactive and beyond the triple state, with absolute Brahman incorporate. His matted locks were scattered all around, upon his body a deerskin was bound, Craving for water, the king was oppressed, and in that condition made his request. But he received nor word nor welcome there, neither a straw mat nor reception fair. Deeming himself dishonoured by the sage, he was incensed and flew into a rage. Such conduct was quite out of character. Now oppressed by extreme thirst and hunger, and his high honour was injured by the slight, and entertained towards the Brahmin spite. He thence, prompted by his disdain and rage, decided to insult the sage, and did a snake over his shoulder did lay, picked up with his bow tip, and went his way. I wonder if he really was reposed in silent meditation with eyes closed, or was it just a pretence to disgrace a martial prince of lowly Kshatriya race? He had a potent son, who when he heard, while playing with his friends, to rage was stirred. The wrong done his father by the king woke his temper, and in resentment he spoke. How haughtiness in evil rulers grows, who steal about the door like dogs and crows, who like servants must on the master wait, that now presume to enter at the gate. The lowly Kshatriya's duty is defined as watchdog to guard the house consigned. How now does he enter in, presume, and from the master's plate viands consume? Since Almighty Krishna did hence depart, there is none now to curb the vile upstart. Therefore I shall myself curse him today. Observe my potency in what I say. Thus he, his eyes with rage were copper red. And then the child of the great Rishi said, first touching waters of the Kaushiki, and spoke with thunder and indignity. Because he has transgressed the etiquette, in 7 days from now will be beset. Takshak will bite this blot of all his clan, for slighting my father, a holy man. Thereon the child his way home did betake, and on his father's body saw the snake. Fraught with distress at what he had espied, with pitiful lament he loudly cried. When he, who sprung from Angirasa, heard the lamentation of his son was stirred, the Brahmin opened his eyes by degrees, and round his neck the dead serpent sees. He threw it off, and questioned then his son, Why do you weep, my child? What ill is done? When thus the sage of his son had inquired, the latter told him all as it transpired. When having heard of that imprecation denounced upon the king by his own son, displeasure to the Brahmin it did bring, who knew as undeserving such the king. Ah me, alas, what ill is done today! My boy, by childish rashness led astray, a capital punishment is decreed for slight transgression and a venial deed. The king is vicegerent of the Lord, preeminent and like a god adored. Certes, it is but folly to equate the ruler and the subjects of the state, whose power guards and grants to them good cheer, whereby they flourish and prosperous sans fear. What times dissolved the monarch's command, who bears the cartwheel sign upon his hand, the world of a protector is bereft, at once flourishes oppression and theft, as even the fleecy flocks go astray, when there is no shepherd to guide the way. From this day we receive of sin the stain, since into decay falls the royal reign. Plundered of wealth there will be much distress, and people will other people oppress, and robbers will appropriate by stealth another's wife and chattels and his wealth. Thereon righteousness falls into decay, mankind from social order goes astray, good manners and conduct are quite disdained, neglected are codes in scripture ordained. But prompted by desire for sordid gain, and like shameless dogs and monkeys profane, with commingling of castes the base and lewd, there springs an indistinguished multitude. This king of righteousness is guardian, an emperor of great and worthy fame. He also a great devotee dear of a mighty potentate and royal seer, who on his holy preceptor's advice has oft performed the great horse sacrifice, when he was stricken by hunger and thirst. He was not deserving of being cursed. A sinless one has been cursed and reviled through unripe understanding of a child. May the illustrious and mighty one, the soul of all, forgive what has been done. He may be cursed, slandered, cheated, defamed, ill-treated and assaulted and arraigned. Though able to retaliate in kind, the devotee to act is disinclined. The sage repented for what had been done, and the iniquity wrought by his son. But of the insult paid him by the king he was unconcerned, and thought of it as nothing. Mostly the saints care not what others do, bound as they are in dualistic view. He derives from the self felicity, which self transcends beyond the gunas three. Thus ends chapter 18 in book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavat Purana, the text beloved of swan-like saints, sung by the son of Vyasa. Chapter 19. Sutta said, the mighty Lord of earth now in his turn could by his deliberation discern, I have a base and lowly action done to the Brahmin, a grave and holy one. It is certain, for my heinous offence, I soon shall reap the bitter consequence, since I have thus slighted the deity, and shall be assailed with calamity. Well, let me suffer now for my disdain, that I may not commit such sin again. From this day let my royal reign expire, let wealth and power be consumed by fire, ignited by the noble Brahmin clan, for my dishonouring a holy man, and purge my mind in flames of repentance, that I never again make such offence. By slighting the twice-born, strict in their vows, I have insulted holy gods and cows. Deliberating thus, the monarch heard that he must die, bitten by the snake bird, occasioned by curse of the Brahmin's son, and took it as apposite, and well done, since detachment would soon from this arise for worldly joys and things and properties. He therefore abandoned, as troublesome, fond hopes in this and in the world to come, and resolved to absorb his mind complete in worshipful service of Krishna's feet. He vowed to fast until the end extreme, and sat him by the deathless river stream. That deathless stream, with tulsi pollen blent, conveys of Krishna's lotus feet the scent, cleanses both the higher sphere and the low, and over Isha's head doth glistening flow. Who would not serve that stream with pure intent, when death approaches nigh and imminent? Thus he, the son of the scion of the Pandu line, to abstention and fasting did resign, and taking by the holy stream his seat, that bears the foot-wash of Lord Vishnu's feet, he gave himself with singular purpose, his mind in Mukunda's feet to repose. All fond attachments thence he did forsake, and did to vows of a hermit betake. Thereupon a host of mighty seers, along with their disciples there appears, who, on pretence of their ambulation, to sacred shrines bring purification. Atri, Vashishta, and Chavana named, Sharadwan and Arishtanemi famed, and Brigu, Angiras, Parasara, the son of Gadi, axe-wielding Rama, and the great sage hight Indra Pramada, as also him known as Idmavaha, Medhatiti and Devala were there, Arstishena, Bharadwaja, austere, Gautama, Pipalada, Maitreya, Aurava, Kashava, Potborn, Agastya, Dvaipayana, Narada also came, all great sages and all well known to fame. Great sages, godlike sages, and sage kings, all gathered to observe the proceedings, congratulated by their preceptors led, whereat the king, congregated by their preceptors led, whereat the king bowed low to them his head. When all were seated there comfortably, again the king bowed in humility, then standing, palms together pressed, began to acquaint them with his intended plan. The king said, "Ah me, we deem ourselves most blessed today, as the great and virtuous grace convey, since martial princes of the Kshatriya race the Brahmins view with disdain and disgrace. Certes, the Lord himself this boon hath sent, this doom hath sent, and made the Dvija's curse the instrument, since else to household attachments confined, I am unable to withdraw my mind. To be thus into apprehension hurled is the root of detachment from the world. Therefore, O Vipras, may you accept me, and may Ganga, the river deity, receive me as one who with heart and mind is steadfast in the Lord, to him resigned, and let the magic snake bird do its worst, invoked by the twice-born who me had cursed. Now therefore, without further questioning, the sweet accounts in song of Vishnu sing. And if I am to be born here again, may I refuge and company attain of those by whom is worshipped and adored the infinite and illustrious Lord. May I have friendship for all beings, then to ye I bow, all holy twice-born men." Thus he, the worthy king, and when he ceased, laid out a mat with tips facing the east, on the south bank of the wife of the sea, and sat him down in that fair company. He faced the north while he awaited there, and had his son the royal burden bear. Thus on the godlike king, who sat steadfast, determined to maintain till death his fast, the blessed gods from their station on high precipitated flowers from the sky, and as from above flowers to earth came, they beat their kettle drums in loud acclaim. All those great sages in that gathering approved the resolution of the king. "'Tis well," said they, who always are inclined toward the peace and welfare of mankind, and would the divine qualities rehearse of him who is praised in exquisite verse. The sages said, "This resolution and undertaking is not at all astonishing, O king, descended as you are in the direct line from those excellent sage-like kings divine, at whose throne the subjected kings bowed down, and glistened with many a monarch's crown, and all of which they straightway did forsake, their way to the Almighty Lord to take. All of us shall wait here until the time when this great king his body shall resign, when he shall the supreme region attain, and released from worldly taint and grief and pain. He is an exalted devotee and great, and until then we shall all here await." When having heard the sage's speech most fit, nectar dripping and grave, King Parikshit commended them with joy, as well beseems, eager to hear on Vishnu's deeds the themes. "Ye have from every side all gathered here, as Vedic texts above the triple sphere, in bodied forms eternally abide, and do not in this lower realm reside. But ye have here your gracious favour shown, who have no selfish interest of your own and seek for others' benefit alone. So now, let me raise this inquiry, O wise Vipras, known for fidelity, with due consideration tell to me, for souls in general, what is duty? And in particular, frame your reply on right conduct for one about to die. Suddenly, on that very occasion, appeared the illustrious Vyasa's son, who wandered o'er the earth without a care, nor did any badge of distinction bear, satisfied in himself, void of desire. He wore an Avaduta's coarse attire, immaculate in his pure soul refined, while a troop of children followed him behind. So charming and elegant he appears, some 8 and 8 the number of his years. His feet, his legs, his hands, his thighs, beside his arms were long, his shoulders broad and wide, large-eyed, a nose that prominent appears, with fair, symmetrical and shapely ears. His handsome countenance with lustre glows, his well-formed neck like a fine conch shell shows. Under his broad bosom was scarcely shown the sunken contours of his collarbone. His deeping navel and abdomen shines with fine creases forming delicate lines. His raiment was the directions around. His scattered locks lay o'er his face unbound. His arms were long and beautiful to view, as the best of gods shone with a dark hue. His dark complexion and attractive youth, and his smiles, charmed the damsels forsooth. And though his innate glory was concealed, to sages who knew the signs was revealed. Of his ineffable greatness they knew, and rose up from their seats with honour due. And he, the one protected by Vishnu, bowed low his head in salutation too. The ignorant women and children there desisted and betook themselves elsewhere. And when due honours were paid and complete, he sat him on an elevated seat. Thus he, preeminent among them sate, in that gathering greatest of the great. The Brahmin sages, royal sages too, godlike sages, and all their retinue were like the stellar constellations found, the bright moon in his glory to surround. Thus having been seated with all respect, that tranquil sage of lofty intellect, the king approached with deep humility, and bowing his head, that great devotee, with modesty and palms together pressed, in sweet words his enquiry addressed. The king said, Ah me, how fortunate are we, to serve the great, unworthy though we be. O Brahmin, by coming here as a guest, thou hast shown thy favour, and we are blessed. Mere recollection of great ones like thee confers straightway on the home sanctity. What of seeing, touching, washing of thy feet can be said, and of offering a seat? Great Yogi, thy mere presence drives away the deadly sins of man without delay, as Vishnu himself subjugates all those who presume to hold the gods as their foes. Even I, it seems, have been favoured here, since Pandu's sons to Krishna were most dear. For love of them and the whole family he hath most graciously accepted me. Elsewise, how could such vision be conceived, of one who traverses paths unperceived, unseen of men, but having approached nigh, one like myself who am about to die? Therefore I question thee, most worthy Lord, thou foremost of yoga teachers adored, what is man supposed to do, and how, when death approaches, as it does e'en now? What should he hear, and what mantras divine by man should be recited, master mine? what should he think? How in worship employed? And say, what is there that he should avoid? Indeed, potent Brahmin, you do not wait, and are not seen at a householder's gate, and only the limited time allow that it would take for milking of a cow. Sutta said, and thus, with his eloquent questioning, these points of inquiry spoke the king, and that knower of virtue seated nigh, Badarayana's son, made his reply. Thus ends chapter 19 in Book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavat Purana, the text beloved of swan-like saints, sung by the son of Vyasa, and thus ends Canto 1 of the Srimad Bhagavat Purana. Om Tat